What's going on, everyone? My name is Karam Sultan, and I'm your host and founder for Tunnel Vision Podcast. Today's a really special episode. In this episode, I have Micah Lancaster that I had the pleasure of meeting out in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But before we kind of get into the episode, I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts and feelings leading up to this episode. So this whole scenario of how I even met him was pretty insane to me. 2019 was pretty hectic. I was in about 4 different cities and very unsure of what was going on. I was pursuing a professional career in Barcelona, and I ended up getting hurt. I partly tore my calf and I had micro tears in my Achilles. So when I flew back, I remember I was really confused. I was very upset and I had no idea why this was kind of happening to me. But at the same time, I was very ready to take on a different challenge during the time of being hurt. I've always wanted to really up my branding. I really wanted to get into the basketball industry. And if you know anything about basketball, Micah is probably the guy that is known globally around in the industry. I remember back in high school when I realized that my coach actually knew of him. That's when I knew that he was a big deal, because at that time he was kind of closed off on different types of training. He's very fundamental. But when it came to training, I remember him specifically name dropping Micah. And I was thinking to myself, wow, like even he knows about Micah at this point. So Micah is someone who I've looked up to for almost, I'd say 10 years now. I remember I used to see his YouTube videos and I'd get super excited and I'd go upstairs and show my mom on YouTube and be like, Mom, check this out. Look at how cool this is. When I ended up getting hurt, I remember thinking to myself, there's no way this happened for a reason. I actually remember, this is something that I've never even told to even my parents or family, but I remember being in the bed in Barcelona, completely different time zone. At that time, I didn't have a phone plan yet. I was planning to get one, but after I got hurt, walking was kind of out of the question. So I was just kind of sitting there and our house Wi-Fi was down. So I was there in my feelings, completely confused in a different country halfway across the world. And I remember crying a little bit and thinking, I started feeling bad for myself. I started thinking like, man, you work so hard to get to this point. Half the people don't even really know what you kind of go through as any human being, whether it be me or anyone who's even listening to this. People aren't going to really know your story, and unless you share it, but even then, they don't get that full context of how you were feeling. So for me, I felt like 2019 was very up and down, and I tried my best to work hard and kind of open up different doors that I've always wanted to be opened. But the moment I got hurt and I kind of got out of my feelings a little bit, I remembered going back to, okay, what's next? Like, what can I do to kind of progress from here? And for me, instantly, I've always wanted to work on becoming a full-time trainer. And I wanted to not only become a full-time trainer to understand it and bring different levels of basketball back to my hometown, Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, but I also wanted to, I really wanted to understand the business side of it all. And for me, there's really no one better than Micah for that. He was someone that I always looked from afar, and I noticed that he had multiple different things that he was selling, and he had a lot of different courses that were available as well, all which were of great value to me. I remember I wrote it down in a book specifically that certain things that I wanted to get done by the end of 2019 was to actually take one of his courses. Obviously, I wasn't going to go see him in person, but what I was planning to do was take his course online. And when I came back, coincidentally, and it's crazy how this happened, he hit me up and saying, hey, who edited this video? And when I told him that it was me, he started kind of asking me different questions, and he said, oh, so how's he just started having a regular conversation, and we talked about my branding, and I remember I was speechless at that point. I was shaking. I remember going up to my mom and being like, Mom, like Micah knows about training in the dark, which is nuts to me because most people locally I'm trying to spread it to, but when someone of such high caliber and such high status kind of understands your vision and sees it a little bit, it obviously is going to make you happy. So we talked back and forth, and shortly after he asked me if I'd ever consider moving my operation to the world headquarters out in Michigan. And I remember I told him I'd have to think about it because I don't want to think out of emotion. But within 30 seconds, immediately, I knew that I wanted to be there. I wanted to be in that environment. I wanted to learn not only the basketball side, but also the business side. And it was something that it really excited me. Like, I remember going upstairs to my mom, and it was almost like deja vu, because the exact same spot where I was showing her his videos 10 years ago was the spot that I'm now showing her that he wants me to come down to Michigan. So it was definitely a dream come true. Very grateful for it. Leading up to this podcast, even, I was very nervous because I spent about 30 days with him, and I'd see him every day. He's very easygoing, very cool and calm, collected. So the moment I started thinking more and more, like, wow, like, I've talked to him every day, but it hasn't been really a conversation like that, like the one that we're about to have. And I started thinking to myself, man, like, what do I ask him? Like, what's there to say? And I started getting super nervous and excited, obviously, but very, very nervous. So this was something that obviously meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to have him on. And it also meant a lot that he trusted me enough to have him onto my platform, because obviously someone who's at a starting point, it's much tougher to find someone of such high caliber to be on something that you're trying to promote and really start up. So I actually want to take the time to actually thank him for even being on the podcast. So, as well as I want to give a shout out to Bryce Stanhope, one of the best shooting coaches in the world, one of the funniest guys in the world too. And also my guy, Josh Dudley, church boy. And the whole Michigan crew, Brax, Mertzi, my guy Jin from China. But yeah, this episode was fun. It was very quick and fast paced because Micah was refusing to do a podcast at the start, and he at the end of the month he was like, "Do you have any questions for me?" I said, "You know what, Micah? Let me save these questions for the podcast." He's like, "I'm not doing it." But eventually, I convinced him. I slowly planted those seeds, and I was like, you know what, it's already done. And then I didn't take no for an answer after a certain point. So yeah, like, this is special. So I hope you guys enjoy it. This podcast was actually filmed in his headquarters in Michigan in November, end of November. So obviously it's been some time. If you guys are obviously seeing what's happening on the news now, the coronavirus is literally taking over the world. So quickly, I just want to say, let's all be responsible and obviously wash your hands, be sanitary, but also stay isolated. It's so tough to do, but it's something that has to be done. Otherwise, this isolation period is just going to go longer and longer. But with that being said, I'm not trying to be too preachy. Hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Make sure you guys give it a thumbs up if you're watching this on YouTube, and maybe 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if they have reviews on there. I'm not too sure, actually. But yeah, enjoy. What's that? He's really lean back. He's really lean back.
They do.
Nice. Good to go?
Sure. Let's do it up.
Okay. Welcome to the Tunnel Vision Podcast. My name is Karam. I'm your host. And today I have Micah Lancaster, owner and founder of I'm Possible Training. He's someone who I looked up to for almost 10 years now, so it's crazy to be here and kind of have this opportunity. I've seen him as a mentor in my eyes, so to be able to be learning from you has been something that I've always dreamed about, so I appreciate that from the start. Do you have anything to kind of explain about yourself, or?
No, let's roll.
Let's roll. So my first question to you is, at what age did you kind of start envisioning yourself owning a business, or did it kind of come sporadically, or did you kind of have ideas that this might be something that you want to do going into the future?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I started, it really wasn't in my head that this could be a business to that extent. Because when I was starting off as a trainer, there really wasn't many people who were doing this as a business or even full-time in it. So I had an idea that this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't really have much understanding of how much possibilities there were in the basketball training world, because it really wasn't an industry yet. So really what I started with was a few examples of people that were out there that were doing it, not really understanding how well they were doing, just the fact that they did it full time, and then just kind of launching off and figuring it out step by step.
Nice. So obviously the training world, just because it is so new, I'm sure you had a lot of obstacles and resistance throughout the way. Even to this day, I'm sure you have people telling you that this isn't right or this can't be done. So what is it that kind of pushes you to not really focus on those people and have that clear vision that you want to approach this the way that you want to approach it?
Actually, I have kind of a different perspective on those people, because it's the people who are telling me that I'm wrong, or the people who are giving me critique, that actually allow me to dig deeper into my own craft and explaining. So I actually love to respond to critics and so-called haters, because number one, I feel like it's important to educate everybody. Yeah. So if someone's looking at like my channel, for instance, and there's someone spewing hate on there, if I leave it alone, then they're the ones educating the player. But if I have an opportunity to respond to that, now I have the opportunity to actually be the educator, and that gives me practice on how to better explain it, because if they're not understanding it, then I need to explain it better. That's the way I've always looked at it. So, I actually look at it as an opportunity whenever I see critics or anything like that, just to simply explain it again and practice how I'm explaining it to help get the idea out there and to truly create understanding. So I think the blessings that I've had from answering critics from the past 10 years till now is it's made me a better teacher. And it's allowed me the opportunity to test out what types of explanations work, what's getting across and what's not getting across, because I know that what I do works and I know it's effective. My ability to explain that is what's the most important thing in order to get someone to actually do it and to trust me on that. So I think not running from them and not ignoring them has actually been the best thing that I've done with it.
Nice. I see you commenting almost every day to everyone that has a specific standpoint and viewpoint that you don't see as credible, and kind of educating people on that. What is it? So my question is, you're obviously a huge innovator. You've changed the game drastically with different training tools, different ways of even looking at the game. How did that kind of start as a thing, and what made you have that belief that this is something that does have a place in the basketball industry and that can make a change?
I think it's just the fact that it was working. The way my story goes, what I always try to get people to understand is because I didn't really have coaches in that type of sense. I mean, obviously I played for teams and I had coaches, but I didn't have anyone who was really mentoring me, bringing me to the gym, working me out, teaching me about anything about skills at all. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't really being taught what the correct way to train was by anybody. And so when I was in the gym trying to figure out how to train, there wasn't a YouTube. There wasn't like anything that I could do to learn it. So I just started developing my own ways of training. So I had no way of knowing that what I was doing was different. So I just assumed that if I thought of it, other people were probably doing it as well. So when I would use cones and pick them up and take them places, or I'd use an object to help me simulate a part of the game, when I started using a medicine ball to help simulate the way I could hold my off arm and get my hand to be a little bit more active and engaged, I just figured everyone else was doing the exact same thing. So it wasn't until really that I was kind of at the end of my playing career that people started to notice what I was doing and saying, I've never seen that before. Yeah. And then once I finally posted it on YouTube, when YouTube finally started to become something, that's when I really realized that what I did was different. So then it was just understanding, okay, it worked for me. Will this work for other people? And so when I started training players, I saw that things that I was doing were being, universally effective in that way. And then from that standpoint till now, it's just been understanding the science behind that, the reasoning behind that is how is this really working for everybody? And what I've come across throughout, this 10-year journey is the reason why it works for everybody is because we're literally working on only the skills of the game. if I was trying to be a game enhancement coach or a situational driven coach, and I'm teaching someone to use a screen and roll, that's not necessarily going to be universal. This type of tactic might work with this player, but it's not necessarily going to work with the other player. But when you're dealing with what I do with just skill enhancement, I'm literally just giving you the skills of the game, so that way it can't fail for anybody. So I'm giving everybody the same opportunity to have better ball handling skills, better shooting skills, better finishing skills, better footwork, and then it's just up to them to be able to apply it. So the more I've been around it, the more I realize that I'm much more on the side of what a strength and conditioning coach's role would be than an actual coach's role would be, because I'm simply enhancing a person. So while a strength coach might enhance vertical or quickness or something like that, I'm enhancing the skills of, like I said, ball handling, footwork, and shooting. And so then it's just a matter of the player applying it and seeing if they can be a successful basketball player. But the skills, I'm going to be able to give them no matter what.
Oh, that's amazing. I've definitely, even the month that I've been here, being able to experiment and try different things through all the training tools, it's given me, I've always accepted it and understood it as something that I believe in. But to be able to even try it out and see it firsthand has been amazing, to kind of see how well these training tools work to help you get into like the athlete that you want to be. So my question also with the training tools is, what is it? Obviously, you've created the rip cone, the weighted tennis ball, the footwork mat, the backboard. What is it that kind of drives you to continue to innovate, and why not just kind of be satisfied with this and be like, this is it? What is it that kind of drives you to keep on going forward?
I'm always searching for accountability. So until I can hold players accountable for everything I'm trying to teach, I'll always still have to continue to innovate and come up with how I'm going to hold someone more accountable to a skill. So, for instance, the footwork mat is an easy one. Mm-hmm. So trying to teach footwork without visual aid, without frame of reference, was always very difficult. You would spend a week with a player trying to teach a certain set of footwork, and it's just for whatever reason not clicking for them. You could have a pro who can't figure out a spin seal, and then a 10-year-old could. So it was really random results when you're talking about the actual quality of someone's footwork. So coming up with a way to hold them accountable, to give them proof that they're doing something correct, is really what I'm always going for, giving them a frame of reference so they can really see the results of their work, and just basically plugging them into a system in which they would know that they're actually performing the skill the right way. So that's what training tools are for. So now with the footwork mat, I don't have those gaps where I can't get a skill to somebody and they can't figure out a set of footwork, because the footwork mat has the built-in accountability to do that for them. And that's what training tools are for. It's not to make something harder, which a lot of people think is the reason why we're using them. Yeah. They would say, okay, he's using a medicine ball because he's trying to make practice hard so the game is easy. That's an old school, out-of-date way of thinking. Could it make it harder? Yeah, but the whole purpose of the medicine ball in many ways is to create sensations, to create delays, to create resistance, to put someone's body in a particular position. So to actually bring in more realistic traits into the picture. And so the player can actually know if they're doing something well or they're doing something more realistic. And so it's really just understanding the proper perspective when it comes to what training tools are there for. So whenever I come across anything that I don't have a great way to hold someone accountable to perform, mm-hmm. I know I need to come up with something to make my job easier. And so that's what training tools, that's their purpose.
Oh, that's awesome. Training tools, honestly, I remember back in high school, I had a coach who was very fundamentally sound and was very particular on doing things a certain way. A few years later, after I left and came back just to visit him, I found it very ironic that he had rip cones in his school and had different players using them, and it completely blew my mind, because it was someone who was the complete opposite of that, and to have him shift his perspective based on what you've put out there was quite amazing to me. And that's when I kind of really embraced your methodology as well.
What's amazing about that is I often see people who are openly critical when they are talking about the types of methods that I'm doing, but then they have the rip cones and things like that they're actually using in similar ways to me, but don't realize they came from me.
Yeah.
And I always think that's kind of ironic because they might have seen one thing I do and they're against it, but then they don't realize they're doing other things that they got also from me. So it's really interesting, and I think that's just the way information kind of circulates. But it just simply means that they haven't quite grasped the concept behind the new thing that they've seen. And I think that when it comes to information, the way people digest it is it almost seems like the human tendency is any new information is supposed to somehow replace the old information. So they get threatened by it. Yeah. So they get a new piece of information that's different than the old information, and they think those things are supposed to be in conflict. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is there's not a replacement theory here. It's the old school has its place, and if you want to call it the new school, it has its place, and they both can live and coincide. And they don't have to be fighting each other. There's a lot of truth to the benefits you can get from over here, and there's a lot of truth from the benefits you can get over here. Doing them both is simply going to be that much more beneficial. So I think, like for your coach, what they probably understood and realized is they didn't have to stop doing what they were already doing. They could add in what I call supplements, which is what we're providing in the skill enhancement world, is just supplementing the skills just to increase the overall ability of players.
My last question for you is, for the next generation of athletes who potentially even want to be in the realm that you're in or get into the entrepreneurial side, is there any specific advice you'd have for them kind of going forward?
Advice for the entrepreneurial side of being a trainer?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is make sure that when you're going into it, that you're not trying to come up with gimmicky sales tactics to do it. It's interesting because some people like throw around the word scam trainer a lot. And it's based on whatever that whole tag is. It's based on, the idea that what you're doing with the player isn't working, but you're doing it anyway, so you create sales.
Yeah.
I think that the true, scam that ends up being out there is more so in the marketing side of things. When people do things like, hey, this is $500, mark it off today, and now it's $50. Those types of tactics. I think that's a really, really dangerous road to go down, to try to actually create emotional ways to get people to buy something. So what I would just tell people to do is, if your product is good and it's effective and it works, you don't have to come up with some kind of amazing tactic to get people to buy it. Just show it to them. That's really when people say, like, I get compliments on my marketing. I don't really market.
Yeah.
I have Instagram and I have social media. All I literally do is I post what I do. I'm just showing people this is what I do. It doesn't take a lot of tactics. It doesn't take a whole lot of strategy. It's just show people what you do. And if you have a product, if it's good, they'll buy it. If not, they won't.
Yeah.
And so as long as you just focus on that, then when you start to sell, you have something. If you always create gimmicky sales tactics, buy one, get 5 free type of stuff, you don't really know if what you're doing has that much value, and you can end up running into some issues later. So just create the product, make sure you're working on your craft, and just show people that you have it. If it's good, you'll be just fine.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the time. Once again, your handle is Micah_Lancaster. I'll have all of that kind of put in. I'm sure that no one really needs to know that anyway.
They don't all know.
Appreciate the time, and appreciate you having me out here as well. Like, this has been a dream come true. I've always seen you as like the basketball scientist that you are, and I've always seen you as almost like the blueprint of what to follow and trust, because honestly, when you are trusting even a coach, a trainer, you have to have that agreement and belief in them before even doing any of that. So I've always had that, and to have you have me out here has been a dream come true, which I'll obviously never forget.
And you've been here for a month.
Huh?
You've been here for a month. Yeah. And so you were able to be here for a month. And what's a good feeling to me is that you've been able to be here for a month, learning the system and being around, and you're still leaving with that same type of thought.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing to me, is that you didn't come here with high expectations and then we're like, well, crap, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So the best part about this to me is that even when you're leaving now, you still have those same feelings that this was a great opportunity and a great benefit to you. So in that regard, thank you. And keep doing what you're doing with film and trainer, because there's so very little people who can do both, and you can.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, Micah.
In the dark.